this is...
What did that say? You are too low? Is that what it said? Oh, no, you are not alive, I guess. That's what it said.
Everything's live. Uh-oh.
Okay.
There we go.
So how long do you want me to wait?
Jay, you want to fix that?
I can't find them.
I can't
Just
see
touch
it.
the screen.
I don't see them. Oh, there you go. So when do we start?
No,
Just
that was good.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Just go ahead? Okay. Hi, I'm Donna Cranston with Defenders of Freedom, and I'm here with Dr. Scharlene Gaudet of Resiliency Brain Health. And we're going to talk today about brain injuries because March is Brain Injury Awareness Month. So Dr. Gaudet is going to tell you a little bit about what she does with brain injuries. And I'll just tell you real quickly, with Defenders of Freedom, we send veterans to her who have brain injuries from their time in war. So Dr. Gaudet, if you want to just tell a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Scharlene Gaudet. I am one of the co-owners at Resiliency Brain Health, and we help people who have been injured, physical injuries, cognitive injuries, brain injuries primarily. So one of the things that Donna and I are often talking about is what is an actual brain injury? Because most people, I think, right, don't necessarily know what a brain injury means or how do we acquire them or anything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a brain injury is anything that, as simple as it sounds, affects the way the brain would function, okay? And a lot of people have concussions or brain injuries, acquired injuries, things like that, every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they heal, and they don't necessarily need outside intervention. What we see are the ones that aren't healing, the ones that people are still symptomatic from. So changes in sleep, changes in mood, changes in their ability to regulate temperature, lots of different things. What are some of the things that you see most commonly with the guys that make you say, yeah, I think you need to go?
I think a lot of times they forget, and they might call me 2 or 3 days in a row to tell me the same thing. Great indication. And they don't remember that they've talked to me. A lot of them have outbursts, anger outbursts. They don't want to be having anger outbursts, but they do. And then they get angry with themselves. And then they also, a lot of times, don't handle their money well. And you may be able to help us with that, the numbers, just forgetting the processing or whatever with that. And then sleep. The lack of sleep is a very common complaint that they have.
So those are all things that we, Donna as a non-medical professional can see in the group of people that she works with on a daily basis. As a medical professional, we see that as well, right? So when we have a person that inquires, they say, hey, I talked to Defenders of Freedom and Donna said I should give you a call. We have the opportunity to have those conversations about some of the concerns. What are their goals? What do they want to do when they get here? And so that's some of the things that we look for. If they're not able to handle their emotion or they feel like they're too impulsive, whether that's running out and buying things or, just not being able to control their emotions, oftentimes one of the things that I call it is crying at cat commercials. All of a sudden, especially our male veterans become really emotional. And they don't understand why they're so emotional or why they're crying all of a sudden for things that they feel are unnecessary, right? Mm-hmm. And then they do have some challenges. That impulsivity leads to overspending. And so now there's some family dynamic challenges that they're having because they are spending money that necessarily they wouldn't have done otherwise due to this impulsivity.
Mm-hmm. You know what, when I was introduced to brain injury for the first time, the AW2, who's an advocate for wounded warriors, had called me to see if I would help a young man because he was still active duty, and they were seeing him at the VA, and this was in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and he was in trouble now with the military because he would have appointments at the VA, and he would start to drive himself, and he might drive by the Walmart and say, oh, I needed something in the Walmart, go in there and spend too much money and too much time and totally miss his appointments. And it kept happening over and over. So she called me and asked me if I would buy a PDA for him. This is before smartphones, and so that he could set his alarm in his phone like every 15 minutes to say, you have a VA appointment at this time, you have a VA appointment. And I was honored to be able to help. I had no idea it would take me on the journey that it has, but that was my very first introduction to TBIs back in probably 2007. So
as we date ourselves on that one.
Yes, as we date ourselves on that. It's been a while. And it's been a learning curve the whole time,
yes.
Ever since, and I learn more and more about it. So my population that I'm concerned about are the veterans, of course. How do these veterans get a brain injury?
So a lot of them are acquired brain injuries is what they're considered, and an acquired brain injury can be for many different reasons. It can be, what I hear often is a motor vehicle rollover, a Humvee accident. It can be a hard landing in a helicopter. It can be too many jumps. We had one young man that has over 500 jumps at this point. It can be things like loss of oxygen. It can be infectious disease. Different types of viruses can cause brain injuries. It can be hypoxia. They've lost oxygen for some reason. It can be a combination. They had a traumatic event, a rollover, and stopped breathing and lost oxygen, so now they have a twofold brain injury, right?
Okay.
And most importantly, it can be a blast injury. And that's the ones that we see most common with our veteran population. They have a blast injury, which puts them off balance or out of kilter. Then they get a head trauma on top of that. So now they have this twofold injury. And if then there's loss of consciousness and or loss of breathing, then we have a hypoxic injury on top of that. So these can be a multitude. And like I said, a lot of people heal. But when you've had one after the other within seconds, within days of each other, and they haven't had a chance to heal the first one, then the second one compounds it, and the chances of them healing those two together are much less.
How about some of the weapons that they use in not only in combat but even in training?
Absolutely.
Is that something that they?
There's some data that has come out now showing that even in boot camp, with the excessive use of some of the larger artillery type equipment, that these guys can sustain brain injuries during boot camp. And then again, if that's on top of days without sleep, if they're not sleeping, dehydrated, and continuing to use these types of equipment, then they can compound that injury in boot camp.
Okay, and then also the concussive blast.
Yes.
That's one of the things I think I've heard many of the veterans say is, well, I was never blown up.
Right.
But they don't have to actually have been in a vehicle that got blown up. Is
right.
that correct?
That's it. So it doesn't, they can be in the Humvee behind the one that got blown up. They can be even a mile away and still receive some blast force depending on the size of the blast. So there is a lot of data, yet again, on how these concussive forces affect people even to that mile distance.
Okay. And I think that is one of the reasons that it's the DOD and the VA Brain Injury Research Institute estimate that there's about 470,000 veterans with brain injuries.
Yes. And
those are the newest numbers that I have seen, which is why I think we have seen the veteran suicide rate as high as it is, because they know they've changed, but there's nothing really, there's not enough that's really helping them to address the injury. And what they're doing is giving a lot of them medications, and the medications don't really address the injury. It just addresses symptoms, and many times numbs whatever they're dealing with, but doesn't really take care of the injury itself.
One of the other things, drugs, medications can cause a brain injury. So if you have an unhealed brain injury and you take medication that is prescribed to you, even the way in which you're supposed to take it, yet your body isn't processing through that medication appropriately, that can create another injury. So sometimes it's not to their fault at all. They're doing the things that they seeked. They were seeking care, they were receiving care, they received medications or therapies or what have you, but it wasn't right for them. And so now they have yet another issue and they can't figure out, and no one's really talking to them about it, right? Mm-hmm. And so unless, and a lot of people think that you have to lose consciousness to have a brain injury, and that's not true at all, right? But you get these guys and they come back home and they're like, you know what, it really wasn't that bad for me. I don't think mine was that bad. I didn't lose consciousness, or I only lost consciousness for 2 minutes. It couldn't be that bad. And then that's a compounded event because of some of the other stressors that they had going on. Like I said, lack of sleep for days on end, lack of nutrition, food, water, everything, right? And so now they just have this compounding issue. And they get back here, and then they're not diagnosed. And now they just think they're crazy. When in fact that's not what it is at all. It's truly just a brain injury, and they just don't have the knowledge at this point to say, hey, look, I need the help because I have an injury.
Mm-hmm. And are there different levels of severity of brain injuries?
Absolutely. So in the medical field, most brain injuries are classified by time of loss of consciousness. So if a person has an injury and if they have not lost consciousness, or they've lost consciousness for less than 30 minutes, they're considered mild. All right. The problem is if you have 2 or 3 mild ones 2 or 3 days in a row, it seems a whole lot more than just a mild concussion to the person that's receiving it. Mm-hmm. So then it goes from 30 minutes to 24 hours, and that's moderate. And if it's over the 24 hours, comatose, penetrating the head, things like that, then it's considered a major.
Okay. And you treat all spectrums of the brain injury?
Well, we're outpatient, so anyone that would have had a major injury is going to be in an inpatient facility. Now, once they're out of their inpatient facility and looking for outpatient type rehabilitation, we can help there. On the minors and the moderate brain injuries, yes, we can help those guys. Again, it's an outpatient facility, so when they're at the point that they're looking for neuro rehab outpatient, we're good to go.
Okay. I think one of the things that I would like to convey to a lot of the veterans or anyone listening, that if you think you know of someone that has a brain injury, when you have those areas that you're just not quite right, and maybe your injury is years ago, you can still get help. It doesn't have to be a fresh injury. Is that right too?
Correct.
Yes.
The brain has the ability to heal up until the day that you pass away. So if you had an injury and it's 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it's 10 days ago, those are things, that time frame isn't the problem, right? We can still help you get to some of the goals that you want to reach if it's brain injury related.
And I always tell the veterans, we're not going to get you back to where you were when you were 20 years old, right? But we can improve whatever your new normal has become. It can get better for you.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the other thing, that they end up living with this new normal, so they just think that's who they are now. Right. And it doesn't really have to be that way.
And someone has convinced the whole world, I mean, not even just the veterans, but, that it's an age-related issue, right? And so, my leg hurts because I'm older now. That pain is not an age-related issue, right? Age does not cause pain. Your changes in sleep, that's not age-related either, right? If you're not able to sleep, there's something going on with you, right? And so those are things that we can, often explore and see if that's something we can help with. That emotionality, the, crying at cat commercials, as I call it, all of those things, those aren't age-related issues. Those can be brain-related issues, and things that you could at least explore to see if there's options out there to help with.
Okay. I think what I would like to just tell people is, if you feel like you have a brain injury, whether you're a veteran or a civilian, you can always reach out to Dr. Gaudet at resiliencybh.com for brain health, and talk to her. She's wonderful about being honest with you, whether she feels like she can help you or not. She'll talk with you. you know, and assess that just a little bit. And for veterans, you can always reach out to us at defendersoffreedom.us, and we'll be happy to talk with you as well. I think we were going to try to see if we had a couple of questions, but I can't see the screen. I can see a couple things on there, but I can't tell if there are or not. So we may need to try and figure that out a little bit. What?
Answer later.
Okay, we will answer later. Okay, we can always go in and see those. We'll post these and we can go in and answer them.
And we'll do better on our next.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that way
first
we'll
time.
have your questions and we'll know how to answer them. We appreciate you guys tuning in today, and we look forward to some of these questions, and we look forward to seeing you guys next Tuesday. We're going to be doing this all month long for Brain Injury Awareness Month. So if you have them, send them in. If you have the questions, send them in. We're happy to talk to you guys. And we especially want to answer what it is you guys are interested in knowing about. Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.